Labour is determined to push ahead with this new racist sentencing guideline, which is going to ensure that if you are trans, if you're black, if you're non-white, you will get lower sentences than ordinary white people. Once again, another attack and a great deal of unfairness in what I'm starting to call apartheid Britain. Now, you think you've heard this story already, but first of all, I'm going to give you more information. And secondly, I'm going to tell you the truth about what Labour's secretly plotting to do. Hello, everyone. This is Andre Walker. Thanks so much for watching this video. Please do subscribe, but also please donate to the Patriot Fund. The link is below. We're going to have our AGM probably on Sunday, where we're going to go through all of the plans for the fund, but we have had some fun causing trouble and trying to push forward the agenda of decency, of honesty and of patriotism. So thank you very much for that. Okay, so Shabina Mahmood is the Justice Secretary, and she has said that she wants to take all the action in the world to stop the Sentencing Council doing what it's doing. Now, we've talked on this channel on multiple occasions about the way that these Quangos are all now stepping in, and there's never any democratic choice. So, you know, the minute that you want to, I don't know, a local authority wants to dredge a local river, the Environment Agency steps in. When you want to build a new load of houses, Natural England steps in. When you want to look at sentencing properly, the Sentencing Council jumps in. Time and time again, what we've done over the years, and certainly since Tony Blair, is to say, this decision's too important for politics. What that means is, this decision is too important for democracy. And what we've actually done is, and you've heard this before, I've said this a few times, created all these various cause groups. And as Dr. David Starkey says, the people who appear on these committees are actually not experts, they're extremists. You know, if I was to go on an education committee for the government, I'd obsess about the fact that every child needed to be taught debating to university standards, because I'm a lunatic in that respect. And I think that when you have people on green committees, they will be obsessed with the green agenda, and equally you'll have problems with the Sentencing Council. Now, the government has said that it would overrule the Sentencing Council, but actually that's not what it's done. In ministerial questions, time and time again, what it has done is that Shabina Mahmood has said to Robert Jenrick, who's the Shadow Justice Secretary, and by the way, whatever you think, the man who should have won that election for the leadership of the Conservatives, he's been saying, well, you know, this is unacceptable. Shabina Mahmood saying, well, this was a Conservative proposal. You had the option to get rid of it. Actually, what happened was the Sentencing Council came across this idea totally on its own, totally without parliamentary scrutiny, totally without the government involved, and then it consulted the Conservative government. The Conservative government said no to their proposal, and then they made them even more extreme. But here's the interesting thing, isn't it? You'd have thought that the former chief prosecutor, the director for public prosecutions, Sir Keir Starmer, would have been bothered about this, and yet there is no plans for legislation about this. So when they say, when the Labour Party say, oh, we'll overrule the Sentencing Council with legislation if necessary, it's not coming forward. And what that means is this: what they're going to do is like they always do, and what they used to love doing when we were members of the European Union, to get away with all of their madness, but blame somebody else. That's the purpose of all of these committees. That's the purpose of all of these Quangos. You appoint all your mates to the committee, they do exactly what you want, and then you go, it wasn't me, Gov, it wasn't me that decided to do it. So here's what I want to say to you. Here are the changes that we need to make straight away. Bring back the Lord Chancellor. Now, I know this is going to sound like the most dry, constitutional, boring issue, but the Lord Chancellor used to be the most senior minister, chairman of the House of Lords and the head judge. Yes, that's right. The governing political party would pick a senior judge in the House of Lords to pick all the other judges, right? So if Nigel Farage comes to power, if Nick Tanconi comes to power, if Kemi Badenoch comes to power, then when you bring back the Lord Chancellor, they will be the people who will be able to pick the judges. Now, the Lord Chancellor takes an additional oath of office, which is to say that even though they're from a particular political party, their job is to defend the independence of the court. And so what will happen is, under this system, you would have, say, a reform Lord Chancellor. That would be the most senior lawyer who is a member of the Reform Party, would be the Lord Chancellor, and he would then pick the judges. Obviously, there would be recommendations from the business. So that is point number one. But point number two, the sentencing would be decided by the Lord Chancellor. He'd be the person, or she'd be the person, that would put through all this. Forget this sentencing council that comes up with all this garbage. It's just another Quango to throw in the bin. And then, of course, the other thing is, and this is vital about the Lord Chancellor, the Lord Chancellor is the most senior government minister, outranking the Prime Minister. What? Well, of course, you'll remember Cromwell was the Lord Chancellor. And that is just, you remember how senior he was in his day. The Prime Minister is just the First Lord of the Treasury, the most senior Treasury official. And of course, that's people get confused. The Chancellor of the Exchequer wasn't particularly senior for most of its history. But my point being this, when somebody like the Prime Minister, when somebody like David Lammy, when somebody like Sadiq Khan attempts to mess with the justice system and attempts to use police to push over their political views, the Lord Chancellor steps in as a bridge between the government, the executive, the legislature, and critically, the judiciary. Who do you think got rid of the Lord Chancellor as a very senior lawyer? Well, of course, it was Tony Blair. He wants to abolish the position completely. However, Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth II, who, by the way, never ever did much political, or never ever did much political, rarely did anything political, I think is a better way of saying it. She said that she would veto any attempt to get rid of the Lord Chancellor because it was a major alteration to the British Constitution. So what they do with Shabina Mahmood is they say that she is the Lord Chancellor, but she's also the Justice Secretary, which is a bit of a cop-out. But the return of the Lord Chancellor, I think, is point number one. But point number two, let's get rid of this Supreme Court. It's garbage. Right, can I tell you what a Supreme Court is? It's very easy. For people with a codified constitution, there are some areas of constitutional law that supersede legislation put through by Parliament. That is to say, in America, if the House of Representatives decides to restrict your free speech, the First Amendment is constitutional law and it's more significant than that. And so they have a Supreme Court who strikes down legislation that is passed as unconstitutional. We don't have that in Britain. So what you're instead doing by creating a Supreme Court is you are empowering a group of people to pretend they have the powers to overrule the democratically elected parliamentarians, and they do it when they feel like it. What a bodge of a constitutional arrangement. What used to happen was the law lords, senior lawyers appointed to the House of Lords, of which one would be the Lord Chancellor, they would make the decision about whether this had happened, whether the government was acting in accordance with the law laid down by Parliament. Get rid of that Supreme Court. And by the way, the final piece of butchery, of course, was that Middlesex Guildhall, because people forget the county town of Middlesex is Westminster. Middlesex Guildhall used to have the finest court interior in Britain. That was all ripped out for the Supreme Court to come in. It's time to start getting some of these changes made. And I'll tell you the reason why. Because all of the powers that these extremists like Keir Starmer, like Shabina Mahmood, the power that they have to do what they're doing is based on the constitutional butchery of Tony Blair. Hey, by the way, I want you to say something to you. Do you know Shabina Mahmood is the Member of Parliament for Ladywood in Birmingham, and guess where Ladywood is? It's where the National Indoor Arena is. I'm heading there today for the Reform UK rally. If you are coming, make sure you drop me an email at andrewalker.uk. I'll try and get back to you. We'll try and have a beer or something. I don't know how busy the day's going to be. Also, please donate to the Patriot Fund. And we might try and pop over and say hello to Shabina Mahmood if we can while we're in the area. Until next time, goodbye.